Peter Navarro, the trade counselor to US President Donald Trump on Thursday, launched another rant against India, calling New Delhi a laundromat for Russian oil and imposing Maharaja tariffs hours after External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar said that he is perplexed by the comments emanating from the US. Navarro earlier in the week had written an article in the Financial Times accusing India's oil lobby of funding Russia's war machine in its war with Ukraine. US President Donald Trump has also criticized India's continued purchase of Russian oil, while other administration officials have all come out strongly against New Delhi's economic engagement with Moscow in recent weeks. External Affairs Minister Jaishankar Thursday hit back at the US charges, highlighting that New Delhi is not the largest purchaser of Russian oil or even LNG from Moscow, pointing out that China and the European Union have larger trade links. Navarro is one of the strongest proponents of protectionism at the White House and has a PhD in economics from Harvard University. Long been a China hawk, Navarro came to become an integral part of President Trump's first tenure as the leader in the White House. Navarro was the director of the White House National Trade Council during Trump 1.0. He pushed for the US to introduce tariffs, especially those on China, which kick-started a trade war between the two countries in 2018. His loyalty to President Trump extended after the American president's tenure, when he evaded appearances before investigations by the US Congress into the 6th January 2021 riots on Capitol Hill. He was imprisoned for 4 months for contempt before returning to the White House as counselor to the president after Trump's victory in last year's elections. The US on 6th August imposed an additional tariff of 25% on India as a penalty for its Russian oil purchases, which are set to kick in at the end of this month. When quizzed yesterday whether it would be implemented, Navarro said that he sees the tariffs taking place. Navarro first described India as a Maharaja in imposing tariffs a day after the 25% penalty tariffs were imposed by Trump on India. Navarro at the time hit out at India's unfair trade environment, highlighting that the US sends a lot of money to the country to buy products in this unfair trade environment, which New Delhi then uses to purchase Russian oil. In his latest broadside, Navarro laid out his charge clearly on war profiteering, pointing out that India purchases crude from Russia at a discount, which is then refined and sold at premium prices to Europe, Africa, and Asia. Further, Navarro said that the money earned by Russia for the sale of crude from India is used to build more arms and that is used to kill more Ukrainians, requiring American taxpayers to provide more aid, especially military-style aid, to Ukraine. After Russia's current phase of conflict with Ukraine began in 2022, the G7 member states had imposed a price cap on Russian oil, ensuring that it would sell at less than $60 a barrel, thereby hurting Moscow's revenues. However, the price cap was designed keeping India in mind. Former American envoy to New Delhi, Eric Garcetti, acknowledged sometime last year. The cap was set to prevent a shock to the global energy markets and keep the prices stable. India's purchase of crude from Russia touched $56 billion in the last financial year. Moscow's trade with India has grown in leaps and bounds since 2022, with overall two-way trade crossing $65 billion in 2024-2025. Jaishankar was in Moscow for a 3-day visit from 19th August till 21st August. During the visit, steps were taken to deepen economic engagement between New Delhi and Moscow. The terms of reference for the free trade agreement between India and the Russian-led Eurasian Economic Union, or the EAEU, was agreed to, with negotiations set to begin shortly. The EAEU is a single market that consists of Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Russia. Further, Jaishankar and his counterpart Lavrov have also discussed a number of issues for trade, including tariff and non-tariff barriers and the need to reduce them. The current trade deficit between India and Russia is roughly $59 billion in favor of Moscow. India's merchandise exports to Russia in the last financial year stood at roughly $4.88 billion. Jaishankar and Lavrov also started preparations for a visit by Russian President Vladimir Putin to India later this year for the annual bilateral summit. Putin has spoken with Prime Minister Narendra Modi twice in the last week. Modi's last conversation with Trump was in June, when the two held a telephonic call while the Indian leader was in Canada for the G7 summit. The positive movement in the India EA EU FTA negotiations comes as New Delhi's negotiations with Washington over the bilateral trade deal continues to flounder. That is all for me. For more such news and analysis, subscribe below.